Then we get to our profitability ratios. One is operating margin, where you have EBIT divided by sales, profit margin, and basic earning power. So you see those three calculations. We're using information from the income statement for operating margin and for profit margin, and then we're using income statement and balance sheet information for basic earning power. Let's look at this over time and compare to the industry. Well, let's look at the industry comparison first. So for operating margin, they are doing worse than the industry. Profit margin, only slightly better than the industry. And basic earning power, worse than the industry. And then we can see that over time, they weren't doing as well. The 2015 estimates were really their best numbers that they've ever had. So here's kind of a summary for those profitability measures. We have return on assets, return on equity, and return on invested capital. And so now we're combining income statement and balance sheet items for all of these. And you can see what we get for ROA, ROE, and return on invested capital. Compared to the industry averages, it looks like they fall short on all three. They're doing much better than 2014, but pretty much anything they did would be better than 2014. So they have rooms for improvement for these three measures. One other thing to note here is for return on equity. Return on equity measures the rate of return on common stockholders' investment. And you can see that it was 13.3% in 2013, and then negative 32.5% in 2014, and then it went back to 13% in 2015. So if you remember, in 2014, they greatly increased their debt levels. So relative to equity, they didn't have, as much equity outstanding at the time. The increased debt caused an increased interest expense, which helped put them further into a negative net income. And then in 2015, they drastically reduced their debt by issuing more common stock, and you can see that their return on equity went to a positive number because the net income was more positive, there was less interest expense, and then there was less debt overall and more equity overall. I also want to point out that return on invested capital measures the rate of return to investors, both debt holders and common stockholders. The ROIC measures the return to all investors, so after-tax income is used in its numerator, like we saw over here, because after-tax income is the amount of funds available to both stockholders and debt holders. And so here is just a summary of the effects of debt on return on assets and return on equity. If assets remain the same and debt increases, then equity has to go down because it's debt plus equity. Then interest expense increases because they have more debt, and that causes net income to go down. So we kind of talked about that just a second ago. Return on assets would decline because there would be a reduction in net income by increasing the debt level. And then the ROE might increase or decrease since both of the net income and equity are going down. It's hard to say for sure, but we can say with the example that we have that ROE went down. Back over here, it went down to negative 32.5%. So you almost have to have an example to look at for this third bullet point. Some problems with ROE are just that it doesn't consider risk and it doesn't consider the amount of capital invested.